Good afternoon. Welcome to the StratexSystems webinar, Enabling Effective Conduct Risk Management. Before we start today, I'd like to apologise for moving this webinar 1 week. Last week I was quite ill and wouldn't have been able to speak for the time it takes for this webinar without coughing, so thank you for staying with us. On our agenda today is conduct risk, and that's the focus of this webinar. And in that we're going to talk about the regulatory environment here in the UK. We're going to focus in on how we effectively manage conduct risk, and we'll wrap up the session with a little bit about us as a company and our solution, StratexPoint. So let's start by taking a quick look at the recent changes in the UK regulatory landscape, and specifically the FCA. The FCA is one of two main financial services regulators, the other one being the PRA. They've come into existence earlier this year, and the FCA comes into existence with a very clear objective around focusing on customers and ensuring they get a fair deal. And that objective is supported by three very clear outcomes that the UK government is really seeking to see in the financial services market, and with the FCA coming into being, we see a new three pillars regulatory approach. We have the firm systematic framework, which is really the FCA's tool for preventative work, and it's through that framework that they will be conducting assessments of firms. The event-driven framework is really around issues that emerge in the market and how does the FCA and actually the market in general react to that. And then issues and products is all around the FCA being proactive and looking at new products as they come to market and any issues that emerge in the market and reacting to that. But at its heart, everything the FCA does is really focused on one thing, and that is conduct risk. So what do we mean by conduct risk? Well, I've just pulled together these couple of definitions that might help shape thinking around this topic. So conduct risk, the risk of a firm treating its customers unfairly and delivering inappropriate outcomes. And alongside conduct risk, of course, we need to think about appetite. So again, a definition there, the level of conduct risk a firm is willing to take to achieve its objectives. And I think it's interesting that we think about conduct risk appetite and think about that in relation to strategically where you as a business want to position yourself. With the FCA comes new powers as a regulator, but also I think a new attitude, and one might say a more aggressive attitude. So in terms of powers, the FCA can ban products. We can expect to see them being more aggressive in terms of stopping misleading advertising, and I think also for firms need to be very prepared for the FCA to publicise enforcement actions much earlier, and certainly the attitude that's been reflected by Martin Weekly and others from the FCA is they intend to be more open and transparent about enforcement actions. One of the new tools that have come into being for the FCA, and this is part of the firm systematic framework, is the business model and strategic analysis framework. And I'm going to touch on this because I think this really highlights the whole area of conduct risk is really focused more on, or as much on, business model and strategy as it is on what we might traditionally call risk management. So the business model and strategic analysis tool looks at it as two stages. One stage is your customers at the heart of your firm and your strategy, and two, it touches on four aspects: governance and culture, looks at your sales process, looks at your product design, looks at post-sales servicing and transaction handling, complaints handling, that kind of thing. So really it brings together the kind of strategic and the operational in this one tool. So how may we respond to the changes in the regulatory environment, particularly how do we respond to conduct risk? Well, speaking to some of our clients recently, we got some interesting insight into the advice being given to the market by one of the big four. They told one of our clients that the first thing they had to do was make conduct risk the first point on the agenda for their board and executive meeting. The second thing was to develop a completely new conduct risk process, and third thing was develop a new conduct risk framework. Our advice would be different. Firstly, we think organisations should be thinking about conduct risk as much from a strategic point of view as from a risk point of view, and we think conduct risk is really about demonstrating that you're selling the right products to the right people at the right time. We think organisations need to take a holistic approach, and we think we should be leveraging existing processes. We don't believe this is a approach that needs to be a rip and replace, throw everything out you've already done and start again. No, we think you should leverage what you're already doing. Additionally, we think conduct risk is a huge opportunity for the risk management team. It's an opportunity because it's high on the agenda of the board and the executive right now, and therefore there's a good opportunity for the risk team to show how they can add value to the business, how this thing called risk management creates value as well as protecting value. We think there's an opportunity for the risk team here to really engage the business strategically and to work with them strategically in the definition of business model, of the strategy and of the operating model. And we think it's a great opportunity for the risk team to further embed risk management thinking and principles into strategic and operational processes, really embed that in and shape culture as we go. So let's take a look at how we think you can effectively manage conduct risk using a more integrated strategic approach. So I'm going to introduce the risk-based performance management methodology, which is a holistic, integrated approach to strategy and risk management. It is core to the design of our software product, StratexPoint, and StratexPoint fully enables this methodology. So the methodology starts off by saying, strategically, where do we want to go? What are our strategic objectives? On the flip side of that, it asks, how much risk are we really willing to run to deliver those strategic objectives? And it starts the conversation about ensuring there is alignment between the amount of your strategic ambition versus your strategic appetite. We also look at performance management to answer the question, are we on track? So that's managing day-to-day performance at a strategic and operational level through KPIs and improvement initiatives. From a risk management perspective, we use risk management to ensure that we know our key risks, we're managing those key risks, and specifically that the business is operating within appetite. And that framework is built on foundations of governance and communications and a very strong culture. The methodology is made up of 7 disciplines. Firstly, we start with strategy. Second, we manage performance. Third, manage risk. Fourth, appetite alignment, so ensuring that the amount of risk you want to take is aligned to the amount of risk you are actually taking to ensure that you can deliver your strategic objectives sustainably. The 5th discipline is governance, 6th is communication, and the 7th is culture, perhaps the ultimate strategy execution risk management tool. You'll see that the methodology sort of has a wrapper there of business drivers, so it's very important that we understand what our business drivers are, what are those critical success factors for our business, and also obviously looking at shareholder or outcomes, so in this case shareholder value, and how you may measure that. The risk-based performance management methodology also comes with a very well thought out proven implementation roadmap which can be applied equally well to the conduct risk agenda. And you can see that we start that roadmap in the kind of strategy formulation stage. So at that point you're thinking about the strategic goals of the business, what's the business model look like, what are the key drivers, what's the strategy look like, what appetite has the board got, and then we start transitioning from the board level into the executive level. So there we're starting to define that strategy or distill that strategy into clear strategic objectives, and then we're starting to map out the strategic risks, controls, starting to look at indicators and assessment of risks, etc., and monitor their alignment. And then from the operational side, understanding our strategic objectives. So what are the processes that enable those strategic objectives to be delivered? What are the improvement initiatives we need to undertake? And then defining operational level risks and controls. So that roadmap can be applied to the conduct risk agenda. And one of the things I want to do in the next few minutes is just show you, so pull out some of the key tools that we would use and deploy during this implementation, and use them to effectively respond to the conduct risk agenda. So right up front, one of the key things we need to think about and understand is what is our business model? How do we create value? How do we deliver value? And how do we capture value? And from a conduct risk management perspective, what's our value proposition look like, and what role does it, where do our customers sit in that business model thinking? And from that business model we can pull out and understand our key drivers to our business. So what are the critical success factors that really drive and determine success for our business and our industry? We can then use those business drivers to shape a conversation around risk appetite. So what we've got on the left is, you can see 3 high-level strategic drivers, and along the top you can see different buckets of risk. And what we can do is we can go through and at a strategic level define what we mean for each of those buckets using those drivers. And the same kind of approach can be applied for conduct risk, where your drivers would be things that are much more customer oriented. So for example, in this case we've got reputation. Once you've done that definition work, you can then decide as a board, what level of risk are you willing to take? How do we want to be perceived by the industry, and what level of risk do we need to take to ensure that we can deliver on our strategic objectives? So in this case, moderate. One of the tools that we have created within the StratexPoint solution is the appetite alignment matrix, and this is a key tool for monitoring the alignment between risk taking and strategy. It's a very simple matrix, and it just shows on one axis our exposure, our current exposure, and on the other axis our appetite. And we can plot onto this matrix organizational units or objectives, and you can start understanding how aligned the organization or set of objectives are. And the idea being, if you're on the green axis, that's showing us that we have good alignment between the amount of risk we desire to take, appetite, and the amount of risk we are taking. If you're above that axis, we're saying we are overexposed, we're taking too much risk, and we need to respond to that in the normal way with the normal mitigating actions. If we're below the line, then what we're saying is we're not taking enough risk to ensure that we deliver our objectives. And this concept of not taking enough risk is one that the appetite alignment matrix introduces and really helps shape and change the conversation around risk management. As one of our CROs told us, one of our clients, this appetite alignment matrix has really helped change the conversation he has with the business. Whereas previously he was the person who said no to everything, now he's the person who says no to certain things, but he actually works with the business to help identify opportunities where risk-taking can generate higher reward. And the same kind of philosophy can be applied to your conduct risk management agenda. And this can be a powerful tool to sort of present, internally, but also to your regulator, to help them understand how aligned your conduct risk management, your risk taking from a conduct perspective is versus the appetite. I've mentioned that there is a need to take a more strategic approach, so I'll introduce another key tool, which is the strategy map. And this is a well-proven tool for helping enhance the execution, communication, monitoring of strategic objectives. And how the tool really works is it really seeks to clarify the relationships between your financial outcomes, your customer outcomes, your internal processes, and your organization, how your culture, your information systems, your people, etc. And it does that by using a kind of clear cause and effect relationship. So in this case, we want to increase shareholder value. To increase shareholder value, what do we want our customers to say about us? In this case, their ROI is aligned to my appetite. So that's showing what the customer is thinking about. Internal processes, we've got an objective there of increasing our returns by 25%. And then from a learning and growth point of view, in this case, we want to increase retention of competent staff by 10%. So this cause and effect relationship allows us to understand not only our financial and customer outcomes, but actually, as importantly, how we're going to deliver those outcomes. And for every objective, we wrap around the standard enterprise performance management framework of KPIs, of targets, and of initiatives to improve or close any performance gaps. We can use a very similar approach to start integrating your risk into your strategic thinking. So again, looking at your objectives, for every objective, start understanding what is our appetite for achieving that objective. We can aggregate our risk exposure up to an objective level to see how much exposure we've got per objective, and that allows us to look at the alignment at both an objective level and an overall strategic level. And then finally, we can use some of the more traditional tools of risk management to look at how we can use risk management tools to both support value creation and protection. So again, for every objective, let's define key risks, thresholds in terms of appetite and tolerances, and then the mitigations that you're going to do in place to manage those risks. Here we have a very simplified strategy map, and what it does is can be used to demonstrate the role of the customer in the firm's strategy. So by having clear financial objectives, we can demonstrate that the firm is likely to be kind of around to provide ongoing customer service and support the products that it's sold. We can also show the customer objectives right at the center of that strategy, and by convention what we typically do is we typically describe those objectives as in a way that you'd like to hear your customer express them to you. And that really is articulating your value proposition within the customer, using the customer's language. From an internal process point of view, here what we're doing is we're being very clear about the key processes we need to manage and control to ensure that we can deliver those customer outcomes and then further deliver our financial objectives. And finally, linking back into the organizational culture perspective of conduct risk, here we can use a strategy map to describe our information capital, so how are we managing our customer information, how are we controlling that customer information to ensure that supports and underpins the processes, which in turn deliver the customer outcomes, which in turn deliver the financial outcomes. Equally, kind of what I call cultural capital. What does that culture look like? What does it need to be? Where are the gaps there? And human capital, which is more about our people, their skills, their capability, and again, where are the gaps there? So if I just jump over to our solution, what I just want to quickly show you, give you an example of, is how that strategy map might be articulated and presented within the StratexPoint solution. So we can see we've got increased shareholder value and some other financial objectives, customer objectives, internal processes, and our learning and growth. And what we can see is we've got a clear cause and effect that goes from learning and growth through internal processes, customer, and finally to financial. One of the things you'll notice about our solution is we've got this little PRC is on each objective. So what we can see is we've aggregated up the average KPI scores, KRI scores, and KCI scores that belong to this objective or below this objective, and this gives us sort of additional information about the performance of that objective. So in a traditional strategy mapping tool, this particular objective would be color coded green based on the performance of the underlying KPIs. However, with our product, what we get is we get some additional insight which tells us whilst it's green today, our risks are in the red zone and our controls are in the amber zone. So we've got some issues there that perhaps in the future might harm us if we don't take some action now. The color coding of these objectives is actually based on the themes that the objectives belong to. So our strategy mapping tool supports very well theme management. We'll come back to the product in a few minutes. So to summarize, what we do is for each of the strategic objectives within your strategy map, what we do is we wrap around each of those objectives a performance management framework. We look at KPIs and actions. We wrap around a risk management framework, which is in this case your KRIs, again some actions, your assessments, recording of events, and we wrap around a controls framework, looking at KCIs, again your actions, assessments, and any certifications. So that gives us a very robust framework and a very robust way to manage our not only our strategic performance but also the risks and controls around that. From a risk management perspective, our solution includes a 4-perspective heat map, which goes beyond the traditional heat map, but is particularly important when you're thinking about it from a conduct perspective. So the first quadrant, number 1 in this case, is the financial, so it relates to the strategy map, and that really helps us understand, is this firm sustainable, and how is our risks around the financial stability of our firm looking, so to ensure that we're sustainable and can continue to deliver after sales service and new product innovations to our clients. In the second quadrant, number 2, this is really looking at specifically the risks related to our customer outcomes and really the risk embedded in our value proposition. Are we delivering the right products to the right customers at the right time? In the third zone there, in number 3, this is really looking now more operational and looking focused very specifically on processes and saying, what are the risks at an operational level that may impact our capability to deliver good customer outcomes. And finally, on that 4th quadrant, really here we're looking at our culture, our organisation, and really is it fit for purpose, and do we have the right culture, the right information systems in place, the right people in place to ensure that we can effectively deliver our processes and therefore deliver good customer outcomes and financial outcomes. And again, I'll just jump over to the product here, and we can see what that looks like from software point of view. You can see the number of risks in a quadrant, the value of the exposure. At any point here we can drill down and we can get more information about that particular item. We can write some commentary, or if there's commentary there we could read it. And we can slice and dice data various ways. So here we're looking at objectives, but we could also look at it from a theme point of view. We can cut the data and look at it just for initiatives, for processes, etc. And we can also slice it by drivers if we wish. So this is a very dynamic heat map, which gives you a lot of insight into the current level exposure you're running. So we've talked a lot about what this looks like from a strategic point of view, but now let's drop down to the operational. And this is really one of the key things that I believe the FCA will be looking at, is not only how well have you articulated the role of the customer in the strategy, but how well are you translating that into the operational, day-to-day, business as usual activities of your business. And we'll offer up two tools here that we think are very interesting. And this is the operational alignment matrix. So you can use this matrix to demonstrate or visualize the alignment between your operational processes and your strategic objectives, and also your initiatives and your strategic objectives. And that can be applied across all of your objectives, and you can slice this, so you can just get a slice that says what are the processes and initiatives that we're running that actually are impacting directly on our customer objectives, and indirectly on our customer objectives through process improvement, that kind of thing. And what you can do is we can see, we can sort of demonstrate how strong the alignment is, 100% alignment being very strong, through to zero alignment. So like objectives, what we can do is we can wrap this risk and controls framework around processes. So, you know, the FCA mentioned in the documentation a lot about new product development, sales execution, customer service, complaints handling. Naturally, these are the very client facing processes, or very relevant to delivery of good customer outcomes. And we can wrap this risk and controls framework around those processes. So again, looking at your key risks there and your key controls. And you can do the same for initiatives. Another important part of the conduct risk agenda relates to governance, and ensuring that people are very clear about their roles and accountabilities in the delivery of good customer outcomes. And we use a model called the RACI model, which we've embedded into our software, that really defines for every objective, for every process, for every risk, who is the accountable person, who is the one person where the buck stops with, who is the responsible, so who are the people who are helping manage that risk, who are the consults, so who do we consult before we take a major decision, and then who do we inform afterwards. So this gives us a very nice stakeholder model, if you like, but it allows us to really define very clearly the accountabilities and your individual role within delivery of good customer outcomes. And one of the things that with this the accountables defined, you can create this kind of line of sight dashboard, which really shows the accountable what information they're accountable for, and we can have the system require a sign off by the accountables every month, so really reinforcing what we might describe as a culture of accountability. So if we come back to the risk-based performance management roadmap, what we've looked at is how we can apply this roadmap and some of the key tools to deliver your conduct risk response. So we've talked about making sure that you have a very well defined and clear definition of your business model. We've talked about using the strategy map to really set out strategically what your objectives are from a financial and customer outcomes point of view, but also what are the key processes that allow you to deliver those customer outcomes, and what sort of organization do you need to create to ensure that those processes can be delivered. We've talked about using the business drivers to define appetite and really the interrelationship between strategy and appetite, and ensuring that you have a set of strategic objectives and a level of risk appetite that are broadly aligned. And we've talked about monitoring that alignment through the appetite alignment matrix. We've talked about using the 4-quadrant heat map to really understand at a strategic level what issues are emerging or what risks are emerging that you need to address in your current levels of exposure. We've talked about operationalizing that through the operational alignment matrices. Again, using the 4-quadrant heat map to look at the operational level of your business, and using dashboarding and KPIs and things to monitor and reinforce the accountabilities around those processes. I'll just jump out at this point back to the software and give you just a quick demonstration of a conduct risk dashboard that we prepared for a client recently. And this just starts off with 3 high-level KPIs, one looking at customer satisfaction in the advice they received, one looking from customer satisfaction from the product sold, and then complaints handling, and just showing high level what does it currently look like. And then we go into objectives. So what are our customer objectives? And we can see the status of those objectives, onto processes, and onto any improvement actions. Let me wrap up the webinar by just talking a little bit about StratexSystems, our business, and also our product StratexPoint. We're a technology business providing an integrated strategy and risk management platform on Microsoft SharePoint. Our solutions are designed to enhance your ability to execute strategy, to enhance your capital efficiency by 15%, and to help you reduce operational losses by a minimum of 25%. And importantly, give you 100% confidence that you are operating your business within appetite. And I'll just draw your attention to some benefits we've delivered to one of our early clients, HML. They've got some great results in terms of reductions of operational losses, reduction of economic capital provision, etc. We believe we provide one of the most complete solutions in the market today, catering for the first, second and third lines of defence, all within a single integrated application. It's a very business oriented application, supporting many of the leading performance management and risk management frameworks, and as I said, it's built on SharePoint, Microsoft's most successful and widely used enterprise platform. The StratexPoint solution is underpinned by a conceptually sound data model, and I've touched on this a little earlier, but I'll go into some detail here. So what we do with it, what we enable through in the product, is you to define your organizational structures using what we call entities, and for every entity we reflect your business model through business drivers and your strategy through objectives, and then we manage objectives through KPIs and actions, and that's really your enterprise performance management component. Dropping into the risk management side, we then define risk appetite per objective, key risks to that objective, and then we manage that through key risk indicators, through actions, through assessments and tracking of events. And the next level, we define key controls for those risks, and again we track those through key control indicators, actions, assessments and certification. If we think of that first section as that strategic level, we also have a operational enablers framework, and that includes processes, initiatives, systems, people and roles and assets. And effectively, for each one of those enablers, we reproduce this framework. So for processes, we can define key risks, key controls. For initiatives, we can define key risks, key controls, etc. all the way along. So this is what we mean when we say we are comprehensive in nature but modular in design. So we provide a very comprehensive solution, but you can decide how you roll it out. Some organisations start at the strategic level, define their objectives, key risks, key controls. Some take a more of a process oriented view and start at an operational level with processes, key risks, key controls, etc. So you can really decide how you start, with the confidence of knowing that the solution, as you mature your approach, the solution can in effect grow with you. One of the benefits of being on SharePoint is the whole data framework has a governance, commentary, workflow and audit trails completely built in and integrated, so that gives you great collaborative capabilities and enables you to effectively respond to board questions or questions from your regulator. We've already touched on the RACI model as in this webinar, but all I'll really say is it's embedded and baked into the StratexPoint solution. And from a technology point of view, it's pretty much all Microsoft. So it's Microsoft SharePoint, reporting using Microsoft SQL Server and the reporting tools that relate to SQL Server. However, we have got an iPad application which we can also use. In terms of our implementations are very fast. So we say 2 to 4 weeks per organisational entity, and that makes an assumption that you already have an existing risk register, you have some idea of what your processes might be or your objectives, etc. And what we'll typically do is we'll typically start off by taking existing risk registers or other information in Excel spreadsheets and importing that into our framework, and kind of starting at that point, start off at 10 and developing it and evolving it from there. We don't sort of get it installed and then leave you to it. We have a process of ongoing client engagement which is built around quarterly client reviews to understand how you're using the product, how effective it has been for you, the benefits you're getting, etc. Thank you very much.